Well, so let's get started. And Tiger, you are there, I think. Yes.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
And so since you're going first, you can take some time. Actually, we've got 40 minutes for each review, and that turned out to be plenty in the morning. So you can share your screen, Tiger, and uh, I sent all of the program and site information and the course syllabus and so on to everybody. So you have a general idea about what we're working on. And Iñaki and Robert probably know it quite well since you've been on reviews before of this project. So Tiger, whenever you're ready, just take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen. Hello, so my name is Tiger, and this is my Aquatic Resilience Center. Just put this on full screen. So this is the master plan that me and my partner Mary proposed. It's called Streets of Water. A big emphasis of this site plan is based on exposing the drainage system of the stormwater management in the form of canals. And as you can see, there are several canals running throughout the site that all of them end up at the retention pond right here, and which is placed right at the edge of the flood wall. We also wanted to explore reestablishing a certain grid within the site. So the streets outside were extended into the site, which produced these parallelogram looking blocks that you can see, especially in this upper right corner. So this is the building footprint diagram that you can also differentiates different public and private zones. You can see the private residential zones are denser, and each block follows a pattern of forming a courtyard in the center, like these blocks right here. Meanwhile, the public mixed-use zones, like the one in the top right, are more spread out and linear to allow for taller buildings and for more optimal use of outdoor commercial space. There's also a grid you can see that is established in the site here with parallelograms formed as blocks and buildings. So this diagram shows the proposed streetcar line, which is an extension of the Riverside line in gray. We propose to deviate the streetcar into the start of Convention Center Boulevard. And the streetcar then runs through the entirety of Convention Center Boulevard, then joins back at the existing railway tracks right at the Market Street power plant right here. So these are just some circulation diagrams within the site showing the different public circulations and the pedestrian circulations and car circulation. These are just, this section in the bottom is a long section cutting through the mixed use district of the site, which shows the canal systems and also the larger buildings. And the section on top is the Convention Center Boulevard section, which shows the streetcar line right here and also the larger streets on both sides and the canals with a walkway that is lowered down. This is just a programmatic axon showing the different building heights and different building massings. This is a rendering of the South Peter Street, which is a mixed-use street, which shows the arcade-style buildings and larger streets that run through both sides. And this is a perspective of the Convention Center Boulevard Canal, which you can see these have lowered down walkways and a promenade for pedestrians on top. So the focus of my Resilience Center is going to be an aquatic and educational center. And in terms of site placement, when compiling all that information together, I've come up with two different site placement strategies. The first one is in relation to the building patterns and block grid patterns within the site. As you can see, there's a vertical parallel grid, which represents a commercial zone, and a horizontal parallel grid, which represents the residential zone. The two zones meet at this corner right here, which is right at the water's edge. And I then explored this further by highlighting the central streets within the site, which then meets right here, creating this long and skinny shape. I also worked with connecting the two sources of water together for water pumping or water management purposes. And within this shape I found that the massing intersects the large retention pond right here with the Mississippi River, which also acts as a bridge connecting the two, which will be explored further. So this is just a master plan of the proposed site placement and shape within the site. You can now see in the larger scale how the site is a connecting point and the ending points of all components in the master plan. And the placement of the site is now seen as a continuation of the Convention Center Boulevard, and the proposed streetcar line cuts right through the site. So here's a party strategy developed. So I first started out with this long skinny block, which then I decided to make it into a ramp to better the flow between the site and the building. This also gives opportunities for water retention and water pumping using an Archimedes screw. And the building's then split into two to make way for the streetcar and the flood wall, with the zone now becoming an entrance to the Resilience Center. And at the end right here of the ramp, I created a downward slope for there to be an idea of a precession and then a recession. And then finally, there are orthogonal pods notched into the building, which are going to be the programmatic elements. There is space on the rooftop for there to be accessible from the rooftop as well. For a sense of finality, at the end of the building, the amphitheater was made into a sphere. And this is just an urban realm section which explores how the building is now seen as an extension of the Convention Center Boulevard right here. So this is just some programming diagrams. The diagram separates the different spaces of the buildings into groups. So as you can see in the first one here, there's a procession going from the entrance, which is a solid material, which also has a gangplank connecting into the floating spaces, which the aquatic center and the educational center right here. This idea of procession is then continuing to the diagram to the right, where the entirety of the upper part of the building is a procession of commercial programs. Meanwhile, the lower part is the community spaces with private areas sandwiched in between the two. These are two zoomed in exploded diagrams of the programs. It shows that the ground floor is covered by very spacious and open areas, and then going into the more enclosed spaces in the upper floors. The service zones and vertical cores are all placed along and next to the water pumping screw, which is along the west facade. So here's a roof plan, which shows a resulting building shape in light gray, being part of the rooftop ramp, which extends from the ground right here. The blacked out areas represent the building pods that jut out from the roof. And now you can see that there are two different building angles that are visible. The first being the angle of the outer structure and the circulation spaces. This angle follows the angle of the existing city grid and the proposed master plan. Meanwhile, the pods of the programs are orthogonal and oriented towards north and south for a more usable space, and also for a contrast between circulation and programmatic zones. So this is the ground floor plan, which shows a streetcar cutting through the site, and also the procession going from the aquatic center into the education area right here. The circulation diagram to the right bottom shows the very linear type of circulation, entering from the streetcar area into the entry garden and the lobby, then into the actual building, all in a linear way. The circulation lines are also connected to the vertical course this side, being these stair towers with stairs and elevators lined up next to the bathrooms. And in terms of building enclosure, in the top diagram here, you can see that the building goes from a fully open space into a semi-enclosed space in the community center into a fully enclosed space at the end of the education center. So here are just the upper floor plans, which gives an insight into how the buildings builds up with the ramp, and also how the programs and publicity change with each floor, with the lowest and uppermost floors being the most public and the middle floor being more private. These are just diagrams of the water pumping and sun diagrams. The water pumping diagram shows how the Archimedes screw pumps water out from the retention pond into the Mississippi River. And the sun diagram shows the north and south facades are going to be the most transparent facades. While the west facade is going to be completely solid with a service zone. However, the views you can get from east facade, I decided to make the east facade a glass curtain wall, but with movable horizontal louvers for shading systems. So this is just an axon which emphasizes the linearity of the proposal and really shows the roof conditions discussed earlier. The detail on the interior is showing the exploded axon to the right, which is also broken off into 3 programmatic parts. And in the axon circulation, you can see that the main circulation path in black is formed by the different orthogonal building shapes. And also this shape is then copied up into the catwalk on the upper floors for all the programmatic elements to be connected to each other. So these are just some sections. The first section is cut from the aquatic center, which shows how the pods on top line up directly with the programs on the ground floor, which in this case is a swimming pool. The same thing goes for the right, which is a classroom, which lines up directly with the programs on the upper floors of the upper pods. These section also shows that these pods are held up by these beams that span across the building, which then connects to the columns at the ends of each wall. And this is just a long section perspective that basically just ties everything I talked about together, showing the connection between the pods and the spaces below, and also between the programs and the circulation spaces. So this is just a perspective of the entrance, showing the streetcar line that cuts through the site, and also for the entrance being from the ramp going up. This is a perspective of the rooftop, which shows the screws to the right here, and also the green roof, which extends from each of these pods, which shot out from the wedge. This perspective of the aquatic center just shows the large community space in the center, which is a flexible space for community areas, and also the pods on top, which aligns with the swimming pools at the bottom. This is a perspective of the education center, which is looking from the catwalk down. So you can see like how these are all glass curtain walls just for there to be transparency and natural lighting. And this is finally perspective of the riverside, which shows a building from the front. And that's all I have for today.
Tiger, what's the relation of the flood wall
Sorry?
to the building? The flood wall.
Oh, so the flood wall is right here. The building is building on top of the flood wall, so it's building over the flood wall. There's a space in the center here. I think you can see that better in perspective. Right here is where the flood wall is, and also where the streetcar is located. So the building creates this like hole on the ground floor for the flood wall and the streetcar.
At the flood wall, shouldn't we be seeing the flood wall here?
Actually, don't think you can see it in this view because it's running. Actually, I'm not sure. Yeah, but it should be running like inside of this space right here.
Because you are jumping from the level of the city.
Yeah.
It seems like you were jumping over the flood wall. I was imagining that we would be seeing the flood wall that is in front of what we see as entrance now.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm happy to go unless anyone else wants to jump in. First off, I really enjoyed your presentation. I thought it was very professional. I liked the way you took me down in scales to the project. I very much liked the way you located your project in the grid and it was a little arbitrary, but I liked your kind of geometric way you got to its sort of center point. In terms of the project itself, I liked it more when it was functioning. I felt more like as infrastructure and less as architecture. I think your big ideas about trying to use the building to move water, the ideas about kind of trying to capture the levee edge and engage with the river, those things were very appealing to me. The swimming pools, though, like those were less appealing. Like I felt like it wants to rip open the bottom of the building and see the river. Like it wants to be almost more of an infrastructural approach to engaging the water than the kind of softer architectural elements. Which don't get me wrong, we're still very successful, and I found your renderings quite compelling. The other thing I think interesting to think about, even you noticed when you centered your project and you kind of landed on it right. You point to like Gretna, right? Like I don't even know where the project points to, but it makes this very interesting urban gesture across the river. And I was just kind of wondering if you were ever going to take me to what it's aiming towards, And I guess the answer is you didn't, or that wasn't really part of the thinking. But maybe there was an opportunity there. And finally, on the infrastructure part, I hadn't heard of an Archimedes screw, but the way I was quickly Googling it while you were presenting some, and it sounds like it's a pump to some degree, like it's running off energy. And to me, there was a missed opportunity there. Perhaps you could have used the river action, you could have used the wind energy, even if you wanted to cop out, but you could have used a more sustainable approach to generating the water movement, Certainly the idea that the screw could have almost gone the opposite direction, or maybe it can bridge over and use the action of the Mississippi River to generate its thrust would be kind of compelling to me, as opposed to having to pump it from the energy grid. But very cool project. I really like the kind of infrastructural quality of it again, and the way it's engaging with water in some very real ways. And I think you could have amped up some of the softer ways even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Robert. I really appreciated that you thought in particular how to connect like the overall urban grid to the actual building. I do agree with the idea that in my mind, it feels like it should be more of like a landscape piece, like just ingrained to the landscape where you just walk up and down it, opposed to having like program, because the way that you would circulate throughout this program isn't necessarily reading well to me.
Yeah.
But I do think that as if you would have taken a structural approach to it, or if you would have really thought about how this is ingrained and engages with the water around, because it's in like a prime spot. I mean, just thinking about New Orleans and New Orleans' complicated relationship with water, and you would have added like more features for people to engage or maybe like learn. You have an aquatic center in there. It would have been more successful, but overall it's so beautiful. I must say it's so beautiful. Great job. Like I thought the presentation was so clear. I appreciated understanding, like I sat on a lot of reviews this weekend, y'all, and just like being able to see where you start with the site, the connections that you made in relationship to the building form, and so how you reached your program is really great. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I have some conflicting thoughts about this project. I really appreciate, I think, the initial master planning. I liked how you brought in basically the grid of the city, and I think some of your initial street sections were really compelling, because I think you really kind of went forward with the idea of the street as a public space.
Yeah.
And it's interesting whenever you start thinking or talking about resiliency and sustainability and what makes a place resilient. And that's where I think I get a little bit lost when it comes to your siting of the building, because to have a place be resilient, I think it needs to have a level of flexibility and the ability to come back to it when it comes to incremental development. And I think the building itself is kind of like a strange object that's a destination, where I get a little bit confused about what's happening with the public space. It seems like the public space is within the building, but the way that building interacts and creates public space with its surroundings, I think that's kind of like the biggest missed opportunity here.
Yeah.
There isn't, basically, like, I'm seeing some cool things happen with the section of the building. I like how you're walking up onto the roof of the building, but once you're in the building, you're kind of in this contained like object. And I think I would have wanted to see a little bit more flexibility or more opportunity for unique public spaces.
Yeah.
I also think with this whole thing being this like active rooftop, it becomes very difficult to use a space like that when there is very little cover.
Yeah.
This is New Orleans, it's hot. As someone up there, like you're able to see so much which I think is great, but you're not feeling very sheltered on that roof. And I think that's a thing you have to be conscious about when it comes to creating spaces that people actually want to be in.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to the flexibility, I do think the swimming pools are kind of a strange addition, especially the way they interact with the other spaces within the building. So I think that's kind of like, it seems like the first half of the project is a little at odds with the second half of the project. I think that's my main critique, but I do really like a lot of the ideas, specifically, I think in the phase 1 of the project.
Thank you.
Tiger, can you put, well, first, the representation is very good. And there's, it's interesting. Sometimes it happens that we are not convinced in our projects, and then we go in one direction, go back, and we don't fully buy ourselves in the project. No, this is not your case. Definitely, you are committed to the project completely. You are enthusiastic about your project, and you have enjoyed like crazy, I'm sure. But I think you have enjoyed so much that you have got in love, that you have begun to drill a little bit out of in some cases. And there were comments about the swimming pools and things. And I think a project that is so strong as what you have put together, there's a moment in which you have to stop adding stuff. You have to stop and ask the project what it needs. And then you become a medium. If the project isn't strong enough, there's a moment in you are hands off. You are just the machine of your project. Yeah. And you haven't let your project drive you. You have been driving the project till the end, adding stuff and more stuff and more stuff and more stuff. And then a sphere that I don't know where did it came from. I don't know if the sun just fall in your piece, or I don't know. Way too much. And I think in a way that has made you lost some opportunities in the middle of the way. So and for instance, I'm gonna draw here just a little bit of the section, no, exaggerated if you want. So you are coming from the inside water, no? Yeah. And basically, let's say that this is the terrain, and here is the water of the Mississippi. That, remember, that is something that goes up and down always. Huh? So the critical thing is when you cross the flood wall. That I think that's a problem of that you have lost sight of the flood wall, because it changed the situation. So in a way, I think it's very smart that you say, okay, let me make the walk over the flood wall, because that's the big thing. We have a city that has the Mississippi, one of the more majestic in the world, and we cannot see it. So you make this heroic gesture of jumping over the flood floor, levee, whatever, flood wall here, to access the Mississippi. And then this immediately says, okay, here I have potential protected program. Then I have the flood wall and the tramway. And the tramway should be inside the flood wall. And then once I jump over the flood wall, I have program that is not floodable in theory, and program that is floodable. No? And your scheme is very strong, because it goes and says, okay, I'm going so once I jump here, I have these incredible views, no, over the river. You do the most daring thing, that is you go against the current. So it's a very strong move. And then you do the big amphitheater in which the spectacle, the show is the river, no?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's an amphitheater that goes against the current, so it's gonna have a hard time to resist that. But in any case, you go like a kind of Indian relation to the water, because the river goes up and down. So you have an amphitheater that probably, instead of cantilevering over the river, I would say that it would be much better that it's just on the ground, and constructs this amphitheater in the bank of the river, relating the people to the changing levels of the Mississippi. I think it's really strong. And then you have this area of protected program, and then the area that is that potentially floods, because of course the Mississippi can go to the top of the levee, let's say, no? So these waters can arrive to here, no?
Yeah.
And will be stopped by the flood wall that is there, no? So you have to figure out another kind of program that is compatible with the floods in your building, and also in the outside of your building, thinking that because you have gone through the current with this piece, this area here is going to be flooded, but somehow protected a little bit from the strength of the currents. It actually will make whirls. Will make it can be also a strange, interesting phenomena to witness from the top of your building. But I think exploring, and then of course you have to make it pleasant, and maybe have some roofs and covers and make it work. But I think there's a moment in which you have lost the objective of what you are trying to do. No, even when you are pumping the water up, there's a moment in which you are already over the flood wall, so the water could begin to go down. It's a little bit rhetoric to put it up here and then create a cascade of water, although it can also be part of it. But a little bit of going back to what means in terms of this big move of jumping over the wall and presenting the Mississippi to the city in a kind of a spectacular and show and way, would be, it's a very interesting thing. But my sense is that you have got a little bit too in love, and you have lost sight of what you were trying to achieve. But overall, it's really interesting, and then the representation is really strong. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Keep going, or are we running out of time?
We've got about 5 more minutes if there are other comments.
Yeah, I guess there's one thing I would say, and maybe it's just I haven't seen Tulane presentations in a while, and they're definitely looking different from whenever I was at Tulane. But I think some of the diagrams, I think I was a little confused about what you were trying to show. And I think this could easily be remedied with a key, because without someone telling me what the diagram means, it was very hard to know. I think you were saying something about, you know, there's dense residential here, but then there isn't here. And, you know, me just looking at it, I don't know what you're talking about. So I think maybe a little bit more emphasis, or maybe thought on, well, who am I presenting this to? Like, what information am I missing? Because you've been in it and you know everything. So sometimes it's hard to see that. So maybe just take a step back. I mean, I do overall like your graphics, but I think you did lose me a couple of times.
I'd also just like to add, I think that for you, I am such a program, I love program, but I think that's something that might be helpful, is just to sit down and think about really what the scenarios are for a resilient neighborhood are, because like I feel like I don't know like what your process behind putting like the certain types of programs was or what your thinking was behind it. But I think that if you like for each element of your project, you just think about like, okay, well, how is this contributing to the overall resiliency of this area, to the New Orleans area, and then clarify and capitalize on those things, it will come across as being more clear.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, overall, it's good. But next steps, if you're thinking about like how you might improve your project, I think that, you know, focusing a little bit more on your program is the way to go.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tiger.
Thank you, guys.
Good job.